Welcome to Balance and Beyond, the podcast for ambitious women who refuse to accept burnout as the price of success. Here, we're committed to empowering you with the tools and strategies you need to achieve true balance, where your career, relationships, and health all thrive, and where you have the power to define success on your terms. I honour the space you've created for yourself today. So let's take a breath and dive right in. The art of focus and what is stealing it. On today's episode of the Balance and Beyond podcast, I'm joined by the wonderful Sabina. Hi, Sabina.
Hello, Jo. Lovely to be with you again.
Yes, lovely to be here. And we are stacking on an earlier episode where we spoke about, is it ADHD or overwhelm? And we've had such an overwhelming response to that episode in terms of comments, people reaching out to us, people saying, oh my gosh, I thought it was just me. And we thought we wanted to dive a little deeper onto what are some other things that are actually stealing your focus. So without further ado, let's talk, Sabina, about what are some of the reasons that we really as women struggle to focus. Let's talk about the first one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the most obvious one that resonates very much with the women that we speak to is perfectionism. You know, this badge of honor that we seem to think is a badge of honor, but it's actually causing us untold problems and burdens. And it's something that we're very passionate about dismantling here at the Balance Institute, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So much so that if you're watching this episode in July, we've actually got a 2-day workshop on how to tame your perfectionist. That is breaking records with its registrations, because as you said, it's a badge of honor, but many women also know that there can be a dark side to this. So obviously I love Brene Brown's, I guess, definition, you could say, of a perfectionist. And this is where she talks about it being a 10-ton shield that we hold on to in a bid to keep ourselves safe and avoid shame. But how, Sabina, do we see perfectionism and its impact on people's ability to focus and be present in the moment?
Yeah, well, what we often hear is that the high achieving women that come into our world, they have really prided themselves on these incredible standards and attention to detail that's seen them create huge amounts of success in their careers, at home, in their lives in general. But they've arrived at a point in their life where what used to work really well is suddenly completely backfiring and is having the opposite effect and is actually having them feel completely stressed, like a failure. It doesn't matter how much they do or how much effort they put in or how much time they put in, it's never enough. So what used to really serve them is actually starting to strangle the joy and sense of achievement and ability to be able to complete anything. You know, women who used to feel like perfectionism was this great skill, they're now telling themselves it's never enough, I haven't done enough, I feel like a failure. They're feeling irritable, they're feeling stressed, they can't give themselves a break. So there is a very, very big shadow side to holding yourself to these impossible standards and thinking that everybody expects these standards from you, right?
Absolutely. And no wonder that if that's the internal narrative about it's never enough, it's never good enough, I can't make a mistake, that it becomes impossible to focus on a task or to tick it off or to get it done, because you're constantly beating yourself up as you do it. Which is why, I know you talked about the exhaustion that is such a feature of the women who come into our world. And it's not necessarily, yes, there are tasks that we have to do. There are things that we have to tick off our list. But those tasks in themselves are usually neutral. They're not as energetically draining or emotionally draining as they are when you're saying it's not good enough, it's never enough. What happens if this isn't perfect? They're going to find out that I'm an imposter. This is such a huge drain of our ability to actually, ironically, get more done, huh?
Yeah. Absolutely. And you touched on something very important there, which is like, what is the meaning that you're attaching to having to complete something to this standard? Like, what message are you telling yourself? What terrible thing is going to happen if you don't complete it, in inverted commas, perfectly? And these drivers are often completely intrinsic. You know, there actually isn't anyone beating you with a stick to do things better. It's coming from yourself, which can be even more confusing and demoralizing. And we see it all the time. It's like, oh my God, it's me. I'm making myself feel like this. And it's important to be able to uncover that, to give yourself a different way of showing up.
And not only does it bring more joy and space and peace back into your life, but surprise, surprise, it helps you focus. It helps you get more done. And even though we think the perfectionism helps us achieve more, it actually stops us achieving. So what we love is when people embrace a lot of the tools that we share around perfectionism and taming it, that ironically they get more done, and usually to a higher standard without the exhaustion and without the shame, which is just magical.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have some powerful mantras and ways of following through on that to make it possible to relieve yourself from that pressure of being perfect.
And ironically, something else that also tends to go with this pressure to be perfect is another element, you could say, or trait or characteristic that we often don't have enough of. And this is this magical world called boundaries. Sabina, how are boundaries robbing our clients and women in our world of their ability to focus?
Yeah. This is another very, very common issue that is either in their awareness or this is news to them. But it's very much tied in with their identities. You know, if you have an identity of being this person who is reliable, the go-to person, the trustworthy person, you know, you can rely on me to get things done. You know, boundaries and what you're able and willing to take on can often become very blurred. You know, when your sense of self-worth is somehow attached to what you can achieve or what you can do for others, or the praise that you receive or the recognition, it means that your boundaries are often not where they need to be healthy, hygienic, and to make you feel resilient. So what I mean by that is women are often not clear about what they feel okay saying yes to and what they want to say no to. Now, sometimes this is conscious and subconscious, but what we often hear is that there is a real discomfort or inability to say no. And this ends up with women feeling like they just have this impossible, never-ending to-do list, which again can't be completed, which further enhances that feeling of it's never good enough, I haven't done enough, you know. So it's all interlinked. And so being aware of what you can and can't tolerate, what you are here and not here to do, either at home or in the workplace, is so important to be able to create space to show up with more energy.
And it is funny that, as you said, the common characteristic is, and it can come from a great place in terms of they have a really big heart and they consider themselves a helpful person, this identity we spoke of. But in saying yes to everyone else, sadly, the person that they're typically saying no the most to is themselves. So yes, I will bake cupcakes for the school fete, but no, that means I don't have time to exercise, or I can't sleep, or I can't recharge myself. And then the other people that get said no to are typically their families, the ones that they in theory love the most, because they're too busy saying yes to everybody else in their lives because they feel some kind of obligation and they don't want to let them down and they feel guilty or they feel selfish, and it becomes this crazy self-fulfilling cycle, as you said, this spiral of, well, now I can't focus on what I want to be doing because I've got to do these things for other people, and then I've got to do that perfectly, and it ends up in burnout.
That's right. And you know, it's not exactly the same driver for everyone, but there would be some flavor of, you know, what will people think of me if I say no? Would my job be in jeopardy? I mean, it's incredible, some of the stories or perceived realities that women worry will happen if they dare to say no. Does no mean creating conflict? And sometimes it just feels easier in some way for a certain amount of time to focus on other people's needs than it is to actually stop and take stock and check in with themselves to say, what do I actually want? What do I need? And then cue the resentment, burnout, etc., etc. It all sounds very doom and gloom, doesn't it? But but the point is, we have these conversations every day with women and we understand it so intimately. And when you're in it, sometimes you can't see the wood for the trees. It's just everything feels terrible. I'm so depleted and burnt out and I just want to walk away. And there is a way to get through it. But first you have to raise awareness and shine a light of consciousness on it to be able to do something and choose something different.
And what really gets me is when I hear so many women saying, we've talked about perfectionism and a lack of boundaries, is, well, it's the job. I need to quit the job, thinking that it's something outside of themselves. Now, we have to recognize there are some jobs that do have unrealistic workload expectations of people. And there are some industries that are higher stress than others. I'm not suggesting that all jobs are necessarily equal in this regard. However, there is so much that is actually within our control that doesn't mean moving jobs. It doesn't mean selling up everything and moving to the country. It doesn't mean ditching a partner or the myriad of things that people have their hands on the button that says blow up my life. We have other options.
That's right. And it's, often, again, the conversation is around either I can do well in my career and feel fulfilled and achieve, enjoy my dream career, or I can be a great mum, wife, insert whatever it is. And really, we're very passionate about expanding the menu of choices that are available to us so that it doesn't have to be this black and white. It can feel very real when you're awake at 2 or 3 in the morning, but how can you expand your menu of choices and possibilities to be able to have more of what you want in many areas of your life? And boundaries are super, super important. And to be able to have stronger boundaries, you have to be clear about your standards of what you want in your life, which is a whole other topic, right?
That's a whole other podcast episode. We'll go there another time. But as you can tell, there are so many elements that sit underneath all of these. So yes, the perfectionism stops you focusing, and yes, your boundary stops you focusing. But again, the good news is these two, and even this third one that we'll share in a minute, are all within your control. You don't have to quit your job. You don't have to step back. You don't have to choose and say, well, I'm only going to be good at this and I'm going to be bad at this. And that gives, I guess, the aim of this podcast is to ensure that people know that there's hope, that it doesn't always have to feel like you have ADHD when perhaps you don't, and you can't focus and you can't get stuff done. We want to break this cycle. And as you beautifully said, Sabina, it starts with awareness. It starts with, actually, yes, I do have that challenge and I do have that challenge. And only once we've recognized that challenge can we go ahead and fix it. So lastly then, let's talk about one of Jacqueline's favorite terms that she's introduced here to the Balance Institute. She's one of our coaches. And one of the other big reasons that we are seeing people have an inability to focus and be present where they are, whether that's work or home, is this beautiful term we like to call emotionally constipated. Perhaps somewhat graphic. I hope you're not eating right now. But Sabina, do you want to explain what being emotionally constipated is and why that impacts their ability to focus? Hospital pass, off you go.
Yes, well, I mean, it's just it's a very good way of explaining like what happens in your system and in your energy and in your body, in your nervous system when you just feel so full to the brim that you're either about to blow a gasket, or break down in a puddle of tears. You're so full that you can't possibly take anything more. And you need to release the valve, basically, because another thing that we hear all the time is, I want to be more present at work. I want to support my direct reports. I want to enjoy having fun with my toddlers. They're only little for a short time, or my teenager is about to leave home and I want to have some quality time, but I just can't find myself being present. I love them or I care about my team, but I just can't seem to show up in the way that I want to. And this is often a symptom of you being so full of your own disempowering, uncomfortable feelings, and you haven't had a time to process it, that you can't show up and be, your best self for other people. And we really are very passionate here about doing the mindset work and the, emotional, behavioral psychology work, if you like, to be able to clear out the negativity and the heaviness of what is holding you back, so that you feel lighter and more energized and more able to show up and be engaged in the life that you have, and so part of that is allowing yourself the space and the time and the opportunity to be able to really connect with what's going on within you,
which can be really tricky.
Yeah, it's about emotional hygiene. Yes, it's emotional constipation, but it's emotional hygiene. Let's clear the pipes.
Which ironically is something that I certainly know early on in my journey. I was like, I don't have time for feelings. I've got too much stuff to do. I don't have those things. Yes, I'd like a bit of joy and I'll have some fun and I'll have some peace, but I don't really have time for that resentment that's lurking there and those eggshells. And I don't have time for frustration, certainly no shame. I'll own the guilt. I've got lots of that, but no, don't want these other ones. But when you work out that, just like the beautiful Inside Out movie that we recently saw on the school holidays, they come as a punch. You can't just suppress some of them and stick them in the vault and hope that they never come back. This is about you recognizing that, oh, you mean feelings are faster? Ironically, that when I recognize these feelings, when I can learn to process them and not be so terrified of having, you mentioned this, being a puddle or flipping a lid. The analogy I love is that everyone is so backed up that it's like this giant damn wall. And there's this terror, I wouldn't even just say fear, a terror, that someone was to poke a little hole in it and the whole thing's going to come crashing down and decades of suppressed emotions are going to come out.
And that it will never stop.
Yeah,
never stop. Once it comes out, it's never going to stop. And I don't have time and I don't know what to do with it. So it's best to just keep on stuffing it down.
And then, oh, look at that, scrolling at 3 a.m, emotionally eating in the evening, doom, whether it's Netflix on the couch, or then constantly trying to run away from our feelings, which is exhausting, hoping that they'll never catch up with us. I know I don't want to feel that thing. Let me go and do some more washing. Like, seriously. And we can't be available for other things.
That's right. And ironically, the truth is, the extent to which you are willing and able to create space to feel uncomfortable emotions and to process them directly impacts your ability to feel joy, laughter, peace, all the beautiful things that we want to feel more of. You can't have one without the other. So if you're living in this blocked up, festering
cesspool,
drain, you can't lean into experiencing the expansiveness. So one goes with the other. And so there is real power and importance in being able to clear things out so you feel fresh and more able to show up.
And I would say that, of all the things that people say they want the most, joy is always at the top of that list. I want to feel more joy. I don't want that joy to be tinged with, yes, I did this thing, but I didn't do those 3 things. Or yes, I've got this moment with my kids, but now I've got to get dinner. Or it's impossible to actually sit in that fun or that moment and create those memories and create that sense of connection with your kids when there's always an asterisk on what you're feeling. So that's a really important reminder, Sabina, that your capacity to hold joy is equal to your capacity to hold disappointment or shame. And we've put labels on emotions. This is a good one. I'll have more joy, but I won't have more frustration, or I won't have more of this. When in reality, they're all just chemical signatures in our brains, aren't they?
Yeah, that's it. And the fear and resistance, we can put so much energy into fearing them and resisting them that actually could be directed elsewhere if you just allow yourself to have a healthier relationship to processing your emotions. There's some pretty amazing stuff that happens on the other side of that.
Mm. And most importantly, this is what gets you back your focus. This is because focus is really just being present where you are. It's an ability to concentrate on a task or an interaction or a conversation without your mind drifting elsewhere. But when you've got these trifecta, which we don't necessarily want you to have, when you've got this perfectionistic tendencies that has become a tyrant and has completely out of control, when you've got no boundaries and you're porous and like a sieve and you don't know where you begin and where somebody else ends, and then you don't have any tools in your toolkit or any capacity or any even awareness of how to process what's going on inside you, is it any wonder that overwhelm and attention challenges become so common?
Absolutely. You're not broken. You're not broken. If any of this resonates with you, it's absolutely possible to, systematically look at this and dismantle it to feel better on the other side of it. It's just we don't have enough conversations and tools and strategies to be able to make it happen, but it is possible.
Absolutely. And this is what we love doing here, is giving you practical tools and strategies to dismantle the perfectionist. And we want to keep elements of it that work for you. There is a big shadow to all of these elements, but there are some good sides. You want to keep your huge heart and your love of helping people, but imagine what can happen when we put that and have you help yourself as much as you help other people. And likewise, when you can start opening up to more joy, opening up to more fun and connection and playfulness and laughter, well, then the world becomes a better place, not just for you, but for everybody else in your life too.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for joining me today, Sabina. A beautiful reminder of what is stealing your focus, and importantly, how we can get that presence and that attention back. Thanks for joining us today on the Balance and Beyond podcast. We're so glad you carved out this time for yourself. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend who might need to hear this today. And if you're feeling extra generous, leaving us a review on your podcast platform of choice would mean the world to us. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the Balance and Beyond podcast.